Welcome back to Missing. I am Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic today, Tim. So good to be back. So good to say I'm doing fantastic. I hope everyone out there who's listening, I hope they're doing great. They'll be doing great, I assure you, after they listen to this conversation that we have with a return guest, one of my favorites, who comes on the show and just delivers such a wealth of information in her independent investigations into missing persons. But Tim, I have an independent investigation about your mood. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for asking. And yes, very excited to introduce this conversation with Laura Riste, and she is a return guest. We have spoken with Laura several times, maybe 6 times, about the disappearance of Trenny Gibson, and it's even its own spinoff feed. And that's probably the easiest way to listen to that entire series is the link in the show notes that'll take you to Missing Trenny Gibson. Otherwise, the numbers are a little bit kind of all over the place in our catalog of over 500 episodes. But this conversation with Laura is about Trenny's disappearance from the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee on October 8th, 1976. And so we go over what is known of the disappearance, and then we go over some updates, because Laura is always investigating this case. She said that she looks into it every day, and I'm sure that's true, because she has a wealth of knowledge. She knows these facts like the back of her hand.
Correct. And every time we speak to her, I realize more and more how no-nonsense she is. Every conversation that we have with her, we walk away with something a little bit new, a little bit more revealing than the last time. There's a lot of layers to Trenny's disappearance and to Trenny's story, including her family, her friends, potential boyfriends that she had, friends who were boys. And Laura's not afraid to go down these roads. She wants to figure out as much as she can about Trenny's life and what led to her disappearance. And hopefully she can get some answers with that. And she does understand that it's not always going to be a pristinely paved path for her. There's going to be some difficult items in Trenny's life that she's going to have to talk about. And I think she does a really great job doing it. And, you know, she's more than welcome to come back on the show anytime she has more information on Trenny or anybody else, because she does look into a number of other missing persons.
Yeah, and we are going to host her again on a couple of other disappearance stories. And Laura has joined us in the past to discuss the disappearances of Dennis Martin and Polly Melton as well, and those are both from the same national park. So she kind of dug very deep into that area. Also, William Bradford Bishop, who technically, I guess, went missing in that park, but he had murdered his whole family and then left the car there, I think. But it still kind of crosses paths with the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So Trenny Gibson was only 16 years old when she went missing in 1976, and that is so tragic. And she was 5'3", 115 pounds at the time of her disappearance. She was wearing a blue blouse with a blue and white striped sweater and a brown plaid heavy jacket. With blue jeans, and she's a Caucasian female with brown hair and green eyes. If anyone does have any information, please call the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation at 615-744-4000.
You can also follow the Facebook page, which is run by our guest Laura, and that is at searching.for.Trenny, and Trenny is spelled Trenny.
Okay, we're going to break quick for commercial here. Please follow us on social media at Missing CSM, and Lance and I will be back at the very end of this episode for final thoughts. Thanks a lot for listening. Laura Riste, welcome back to the podcast. How are you today?
Great. How are you folks?
We're doing even better now that you've rejoined the show. It's been a little while, and you are one of the most informative and dogged, I got to use that word more, dogged investigators that we've had on the show. You've looked into a number of disappearances, cold cases. But for anyone who does not know who you are, can you fill in the listeners on the great Laura Riste?
Well, I appreciate the word great, but I'm really just an average person working full time, who's had an interest in missing persons and cold cases since I was a child. And I stumbled across Trenny's case in 2003, and I've been working on it doggedly, as you say, ever since. But I'm by no means a private investigator, anything like that. I am very interested in the field. I'm interested in the breakthroughs that we've had in the last few years with genetic genealogy. If I ever could leave my day job and pursue something else, I would research cold cases full time.
Well, that'd be amazing. I think you'd be a benefit to any group that has you investigating cold cases. So, how did you get involved in doing that? In I guess sleuthing. I know Trenny's case is one that you followed very closely, but how did you get involved in any of these at all?
Well, I always was interested in it and like doing a lot of reading and research and that sort of thing, just kind of for my own information. But I had a bad accident in 2005, and I was laid up at home for about 3 months recuperating and healing from a broken leg. And we had the internet by then was up and running, although it was pretty slow because out where I lived out in the sticks, we were on the old dial-up system. But I had a lot of time on my hands, and that's when I started jumping in and researching some of these old cases, Trenny's mainly in particular. But we had the forum web sleuths, we had newspapers.com, we had newspaper archives. So, I mean, with a click of your mouse, you could find all kinds of information about these cases. Trenny's particularly, but some from the province where I am, Alberta in Canada as well, that I grew up hearing about or seeing the missing posters up in the post office, the local post office. They were kids that were my age, perhaps a little bit older, and I started gleaning information about them as well. And of course, you got Amazon, and then you could buy a book on if somebody published a book on the case, and you could get more information. I always was a bit of an information junkie, much of it useless, but information nonetheless.
Were there or are there a lot of kids that are missing in that area? Because you said you'd see the posters around. Was that something like a Stranger Thing type deal?
When I was growing up, typically we have the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So if you had to go to the police station for any reason, like to get a criminal background check for work or anything like that, they had a big bulletin board up and they had this "Have you seen me?" And there would be about half a dozen pictures of missing children and teens from my province of Alberta in the late 70s, early to mid 80s. And most of those are still all unsolved to this day. And the local post office also had a bulletin board with the same pictures and "Have you seen me?" So on and so forth. But once, like I said, I was able to research in 2005 when I was home recuperating with the broken leg. You had unsolved.com. There were several other missing persons websites that you could go to. And basically, I was just curious, has anyone ever found Carolyn Elaine Prizer? Did anyone ever figure out what happened to Shelley Ann Basque and that sort of thing? Jeffrey Dupree, did anybody ever find him? So that's kind of where I went with that.
Really interesting stuff, yeah. And we know you got very deep involved in Trenny Gibson's disappearance. Can you tell us a little bit about Trenny and her disappearance?
Well, Trenny was a 16-year-old girl. She lived in Knoxville, Tennessee. She lived in an upper middle class neighborhood called Rocky Hill. Very beautiful neighborhood to this day. Lots of mature trees, large houses. Real family oriented neighborhood where families tended to get together and toboggan down the hill and so on and so forth. Her father worked for a chemical company and her mother was a housewife. They were devout Southern Baptists. And they had moved to Knoxville somewhere around 1967, 1968. Originally, they hailed from Polk County. It's a southern county in southern Tennessee, pardon me, is where they came from originally. Then they went to Chattanooga for a spell, and then they moved to Knoxville. So Treny was a typical schoolgirl, 1976. It was the centennial year. And she started her junior year in September of that year at Bearden High. She knew a lot of her classmates because they'd attended Bearden Junior High together as well. And before that, Trenny had attended West Hills Elementary, and some of the same students were all part of that group. West Hills to Bearden Junior High, then to Bearden Senior High. So Trenny was interested in horticulture, plants, living things, gardening, that sort of thing. And she decided that she wanted to pursue that and potentially go to the University of Tennessee and get a degree in landscape architecture. So she'd be building backyards and front yards and things like that. And, just a really fascinating field of study if you're into that sort of thing. And that particular year, they had an ornamental horticulture elective class held at Bearden High. And the building where they had the electives was actually about a block from the regular school. And this class was being taught by Mr. Wayne Dunlap. He had graduated from the University of Tennessee, and this was his first year teaching at Bearden. And the students took this class, and they were part of a group that would later attend the field trip to the Smokies on the 8th of October, 1976.
I know that you've told this part of the story a couple of times, but for anybody who hasn't heard, you do have this remarkable moment when you discovered that Trenny was going to be the person's story that you wanted to tell, that you wanted to look into her disappearance. This sort of otherworldly incident happened. Can you tell us about that again?
Well, I've come under fire. Some people think I'm, trying to proclaim I'm psychic. I definitely am not. Or clairvoyant. I tell them, if I were clairvoyant, do you think I'd work here? Kind of thing. But I had a pivotal moment the first time I ever ran across Trenny's case, where suddenly everything just made sense. Where, if there was ever any doubt of who I was and where I was and what I was going to do and where I was going, it was all of that was gone now. I had a path and I knew where I had to go. And that was that I was supposed to find out what happened to this young girl. And when I did find out, I was supposed to tell everybody about it and make them aware.
And so once the class got to the park, what happened then? How did they lose track of Trenny?
Well, their instructions were to hike to Andrews Bald from the Klingman's Dome parking lot. They could eat their lunch when they got there because the students had brought bag lunches. And then they were to observe the trees, plants, that sort of thing. They weren't supposed to pick or gather anything, just look. Then they were supposed to make their way back down the trail to the school bus and be back for 3:30. But the niggle-naggle in all of this was Mr. Dunlap was the only adult supervisor with 40 teenagers. And I mean, you got to give it to the guy. He tried, but it's impossible for him to hike with everybody. He did hike with several groups throughout the day, and the older students were kind of supposed to look out for the younger ones. And for the most part, that happened. Trenny hiked to the Bald with her friend Robert Simpson Jr. And Trenny knew Robert quite well. He actually was a friend of her older brother Bob's. And she felt fairly safe with him. I mean, Bob knew him and everything. And Bob had actually asked his friend Robert Simpson if he'd kind of just, keep an eye on Trenny and make sure that she was all right. At one point, Robert lent Trenny his jacket because Trenny just had a blouse and a light sweater on, and she was cold. And the weather wasn't the greatest that day, so he took off his brown and orange plaid jacket and gave it to Trenny to wear. So they were at the ball, they ate their lunch, everything seemed normal. Robert Simpson claimed that Trenny didn't seem to be acting differently or strangely. He didn't think that she was planning to go anywhere because he actually ate the other half of her sandwich that she couldn't finish. Then things got a little cloudy in the sense that Robert Simpson said that he was going to go track a bear. And Trenny seemed to want to leave his company and just walk back down to the bus by herself. So they parted ways. Robert Simpson went to go look for this bear, supposedly, and Trenny left to go hike back down to the school bus.
I do remember talking about this with you and just kind of going off on the ridiculousness of somebody wanting to track a bear. I don't know. Maybe that's just something that they did. Like, I would never, if I saw a bear, and I've seen a bear, and you know what I did? I walked away. Like, I did not go track the thing.
Well, it could have been, a lot of things. It could have been Robert Simpson. He was very interested in wildlife and things like that. It could have been such that he was going to go look for this bear, and Trenny said, you know what? I don't want any part of this. I can't see this ending particularly well. I'm out of here. It could have been something like that. The bear thing, is rather ridiculous. It could have been a euphemism for something else. I'm going to go smoke up, or I'm going to go do this or that. I don't know. But anyway, they parted ways, and Trenny went to go walk back down to the bus. We don't know if anything nefarious happened. If Robert potentially made a pass at Trenny and that's why she wanted to leave, we don't know.
Right. And then she really just seemed to have dropped off the face of the earth. There was a pretty major search not long after that seems to have really turned up nothing.
I believe that if Trenny, for some reason, is in that park, she's in the underbrush somewhere, buried so deep that they were never able to find her, or she fell off a cliff or something like that. I tend to believe more that she's deep in the underbrush somewhere where they couldn't find her, if she is still in that park. People bring up, well, wild animals and things like that. Yes, absolutely, there are wild animals in that park, but a wild animal's going to make quite a mess. There would have been screams, blood, scraps of clothing. I mean, they're not interested in chewing on your sneakers, right? They potentially would have made a mess, and there would have been some scraps of something found.
Yeah, exactly. And also, she was with a group of people that almost immediately realized that she wasn't there, right? And if something had happened to her with a wild animal, like you said, there'd be screams, there would be something.
Blood, something, yes. Yeah. Scraps of cloth, yeah. Even if a bear or something ate you whole, I mean, in the bear's scat, you're going to find like bits of fabric and things that it couldn't digest and whatever. There would have been some debris left behind. They searched that park pretty thoroughly. Unless she got away by car, it would be pretty difficult for her to walk as far as she potentially could have on foot where they searched.
And how soon into her disappearance did they start a search?
Well, at 3:30, they claimed that they last saw Trenny somewhere in the neighborhood of 2:45, 3 o'clock was the last time she was seen by anybody. They were supposed to be at the bus at 3:30. So shortly after that, it was noticed, hey, she's missing. So then the search began. So Trenny was missing 30 to 45 minutes before a search actually got underway for her. And the area to Andrews Bald was searched. The teacher, Mr. Dunlap, he went and searched Double Springs, the trail going out there and back, and he also looked in the shelter, thinking that she got confused and took the wrong trail back and just got mixed up. He did not find her, but he claimed that he did see Adidas tennis shoe footprints along the trail. And they matched the circle pattern that was on the bottom of Trenny's shoes. And that could be significant or insignificant. A lot of teenagers wore those shoes in those days.
Yeah, now I'm just curious. If that was Trenny, where would she have been going? Like, where did those tracks lead?
Well, we don't know if she was being chased by somebody, and that's why she had these shoe prints, or if she was just honestly lost, got on the wrong trail and was wandering around. We don't know what the outcome of that was, because the students that claim to have last seen Trenny, they were walking back down the Forney Creek Trail to go to the bus, and that's where they saw Trenny step off to the right and sort of crouched down like she was looking at something, and it looked like she actually left the trail. So that when these students who were resting at the time got back on the trail to go back to the bus, they actually stopped at around the area where they thought that Trenny had stopped and crouched down and looked for her. But the girl that I spoke to, she said she couldn't understand why anybody would get off the trail there because there was nowhere to go. That trail, once you step off, everything is uphill there, and there's nothing there, but there was a rock that kind of had a stream in it, like it had its own running little stream of water. That was roughly the area where Trenny had stepped off, but everything went uphill. She said it was just like a really strange place for somebody to get off the trail because they would have been going uphill. There's photos of this on my Searching for Trenny page on Facebook. I had a gentleman that is an avid hiker, and he went to the park last fall and he took several photographs, and apparently this rock with the stream in it is still there. It's still in existence. But he took photos of all of that, and he said, yeah, that would be a really strange place, like to actually leave the trail. And that's very rugged terrain. You know, there's just tree after tree after tree. It would make no sense to get off there. Maybe Trenny saw something, a little animal, something like that, a plant or a flower. Maybe that's what caught her attention. Potentially a person. We don't know.
All right, we're going to take a quick break for commercial. And just a reminder, folks, that we will return at the end of this conversation with some final thoughts.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program.
Yeah, I would think more along the lines of a person, because if she's with people, right? She was with other people. And that always struck me as odd that those people didn't further look into her ducking into the woods. Like, what's your opinion on that?
It was that last group of students that she hiked with. And anyway, they sat down to rest because one of the young men that was in the group, he was asthmatic, and the altitude and everything else, they sat down for a few minutes to rest because they were breathing hard. And Trenny was a little bit too, but she insisted no, she was going to keep going. So, because this group had said, hey, sit down with us and whatever, and we'll rest for a minute. And she said, no, she wanted to keep going. So she did. And then that's when they noticed her seem to step off the trail. And this girl said that she did the same thing. She even called for Trenny, never heard a response. And she didn't really think much of it. She figured, Trenny had gotten back on the trail and was down at the bus waiting for them. It was when they got back down there and she wasn't there that's kind of when the shit hit the fan.
Right, and there was some weirdness after Trenny's disappearance, too. Obviously, she wasn't found in the immediate aftermath. She still hasn't been found. Tell us a little bit about students found afterwards wearing some jewelry of Trenny's or having a comb.
Well, Robert Simpson Jr., now that was the young man that supposedly went off tracking the bear, that was hiking with Trenny for the morning, not the morning, but for the first portion of that trip. He had the comb on the dash of his car, and it was actually Trenny's brother Bob that had noticed it and said, hey man, you have my sister's comb? What the hell? And Robert Simpson just sort of passed it off as, oh yeah, Trenny asked me to hold on to it for her. And that was thought as very suspicious because Trenny loved that comb. She always had it in her pocket. It had been a special treat her mother had bought her. It was kind of a heavy plastic one. It wasn't like your 10-cent goodie variety that you got at the drugstore in those days. So they thought that was pretty strange. And Trenny wasn't somebody that, just casually like gave her belongings to other students. Her stuff was her stuff. She was quite particular that way. And Trenny had this ring, and reports vary. Some say it was $600, some say it was $60, on and on, back and forth. But Trenny had a really nice ring. It was a star sapphire, and they were fairly popular in those days. And it went missing. And then it turned up amongst one of the sophomore girls. So one of the girls in a class behind Trenny had her ring. So somehow this information got back to a friend of the Gibsons that they went to church with, and she went home and told her daughter. And her daughter was a good friend of Trenny's, but her daughter and Trenny did not tend to attend Bearden together. They actually lived in a different neighborhood, but they knew each other well from church. And they were very distressed about this student having this ring. They came up with this plan to get the daughter, who I'll call Linda, to call the girl that had the ring. She was another one that she was known to them from church, and try to figure out how she got it, that sort of thing, and implore her to return it to the Simps or back to the Gibsons, because that was the right thing to do. So Linda did call this girl, and the girl was very evasive. She did not want to give up how she got this ring, where she got it, none of that. Eventually, she came around and said that Trenny actually had given her the ring herself to hold for her. And when Linda pressed her, eventually this girl said, "Well, yes, I'll give it back to the Gibsons. I guess that would be the right thing for me to do," but she never did. And the Gibsons claimed that they tried to get the police to prosecute this girl, try to get the ring back, that sort of thing, but nothing ever came of it. To this day, we don't know where the ring is. And that girl that was supposed to have had it in her possession, she died more than 20 years ago.
Jeez. Well, how was it determined that this was Trenny's ring in the first place? If this was a popular ring amongst the youth, I guess, of the time, how did it become determined definitively that it was her ring?
Really, it's not definitive. It's all hearsay. This girl of Clay, she had the ring. The mother of Linda said, "Oh my God, so and so has got Trenny's ring." She got her daughter to phone her. This girl said, "Oh yeah, it's Trenny's ring, but she gave it to me to hold on to it for her," kind of thing. Well, I guess I should give it back to the Simpsons, but she just never did. It's really just their word against our word. But the Gibsons claim that they did try to get the authorities to get the ring back, but nothing came of it. Really, what could they do if it was claimed that, oh well, she gave it to me to hold on to it for her or whatever. They had no proof that she stole it or anything like that.
A lot of interesting stuff happening during Trenny's disappearance and after Trenny's disappearance. Certain suspects have been discussed by you, at least here that we've heard. We know about Bob Simpson. We know about Kelvin Bowman.
Right.
Where are you at now with your investigation?
Well, a fellow named Michael Bouchard contacted me last summer. And he's a published author. He's published about 15 books. One about Dennis Martin, who we know disappeared from the park in 1969. One about Charles McCullough, who disappeared from, well, he didn't exactly disappear. He was he was found dead in the at Crater Lake in Oregon, and it's was always a mystery as to how he was found and that sort of thing. And Michael goes through and sort of debunks the theory about there was some sort of supernatural thing that happened to Charles McCullough and that sort of thing. Joan Risch was another one that he wrote a book about. But anyway, he's got a very lengthy law enforcement background in Connecticut. And he contacted me because he got intrigued about Trenny's case and the work that I was doing. And he's been doing his best to help me. What I'm trying to do is obtain the FBI files on Trenny's case through the Freedom of Information Act, and I keep getting turned down. Michael ran into the same problem with Dennis Martin. He eventually got the FBI files using what's called the exclusionary rule. And we're trying to do the same with Treny. We're on our 8th or ninth attempt right now to get the FBI file through the Freedom of Information Act. Basically, I've had many people look into it for me and try and get information, and I've been told that because of the laws in Tennessee, I can't get any records unless I have a subpoena. There's no way for me to get that information. One sympathetic lady that I talked to from the FBI told me that Treny's case was very poorly investigated, and she apologized to me for that. And I thanked her, but I still am no closer into getting the information. But Michael is trying to obtain that for us, and then to see where we can go with that. Likely it'll all be redacted, but that's fine. I've learned to to look through redacted files before and glean what I can. So anyway, we also were able to track down and speak to Kelvin Bowman last summer. Kelvin was very open with us. The guy is absolutely no saint. He did some bad things. He totally is open about it. There are some things that he shouldn't have done in his life, sexual assault, driving under the influence, that sort of thing. We spoke to him at length about Treny. Michael and I both did. I don't feel that he went to the park that day and harmed her. He did not seem to have any animosity towards Treny. In fact, he kind of lamented he'd like to know whatever happened to her too. He seemed remorseful that she just seemed to vanish in 1976 and never turned up anywhere again. His story as to what happened the night that he supposedly broke into the Gibson house in 1975 makes far more sense than the Gibsons' version did. Kelvin told me that he and Treny were seeing each other, they had a relationship, and she would leave her bedroom window open for him. They'd prearrange it at school. And she'd leave her window open for him, and then he'd come over and visit her. Unfortunately, the night of the break-in, Treny's mother must have gotten suspicious, and that's when she shot Kelvin. But like he said, he never came into the house after he had been shot. He went limping down the street and eventually caught up with the fellow that would give him a ride to Treny's neighborhood. And that coincides with what the neighbors told me that lived close to the Gibsons, that they had heard the gunshot and then had seen this young black male limping down the street moaning that he had been shot.
So was this break-in something that, was it not a break-in? Was it a planned?
It was not a break-in. Kelvin was going over to see Treny. She left her window open. And Hope had gotten suspicious that there was something going on with Treny. She was seeing somebody, whatever, and that's when he came over and went to go get into Treny's window. Then that's when she shot him.
Wow, really interesting. Yeah, that is kind of pretty vastly different from the last story that we heard from Treny's family, saying that Kelvin, after he was shot, tried to break in afterwards.
Well, he was shot, and then he came in the house, and he was basically held there until the police came, and Kelvin said that's not what happened. He said, after I was shot, he said, I went off limping down the street, and he said, and eventually I caught up with the fellow that gave him a ride to Treny's neighborhood. Kelvin used to get a ride from a friend. He lived in a neighborhood that was quite far from where Treny lived. And basically this person would drive him over there and then pick him up later. So Kelvin went limping off down the street with this gunshot wound in his foot. The neighbors said that, yes, that was what happened because they had witnessed it themselves. He caught up then with this young man that had given him a ride and went to the hospital. And Kelvin told us that he was in the hospital and Mr. Gibson came there and literally tore into him and told him, you stay away from us, you stay away from Treny, you're not good enough for her, all that, and just warned him to stay away.
How did Treny and him meet?
At school.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Treny knew the whole family. She was good friends with Kelvin's sister, Annette. So they knew each other from Bearden, and they also knew each other from Bearden Junior High. And it was fairly common knowledge among the Bearden High students that Trenny and Kelvin were seeing one another.
And were there other young men who Trenny was friendly with or seeing?
Kelvin was the biggest one. We asked Kelvin point blank, did he see Trenny socially after he got released from, because he was sentenced to a correctional institution, and then he came back to Bearden. He was supposed to do 2 years, but he only ended up doing 6 months, and then he just returned to school. And we asked him, did you see Trenny after? And he said no. He said we were not an item after. He said I didn't want anything to do with. He said he had feelings for Trenny, but he wasn't going to get involved with her family. They were racist. He stayed away from her as much as he could. The Gibsons say that he was harassing Trenny at school. Kelvin says no, he stayed away. Trenny seemed to be interested in another young black man after Kelvin, and his name was Derek Scott. He was a basketball player.
Interesting stuff. So yeah, a little bit of a he said, she said in regards to that story and their relationship, but it sounds like they were an actual item back in 1975.
I had suspected that there was something between them. I just didn't know what exactly, was happening, but his story makes a lot more sense than the Gibson story does, where, he was actually invited in, the window was left open, her mother got suspicious, she shot him, winged him in the foot, then he went off limping down the street, which is what the neighbors had said. But I'm going to reiterate, Kelvin was no saint. He did a lot of bad shit to, a few other people. There's sexual assault, things like that. He did smarten up quite a bit as he grew older. But still, he was no saint. He was no angel either. We asked him point blank, could Trenny have been pregnant when she disappeared? Was it yours? And he said no. He said, I never had anything to do with her. He said, after I came back from, I believe it was Greenville was the name of the place where he was sent. He said he'd see her at school, that sort of thing, but they never saw each other after school, if you know what I mean, after that point, according to him. He said that if she had gotten pregnant, well, it wasn't his, so is how he put it.
Okay, and he was away for 6 months.
Yes.
Right, and then he comes back to school after 6 months and sees Trenny in the halls.
Which would have been rather awkward, I have to admit, but yes.
Right, so that's not possible, right? So if she had gotten pregnant from him, I mean, she would have been 6 months at least into a pregnancy.
Yeah, no, we did ask him point blank, all kinds of things can happen, but no, he said it had nothing to do with him, if that were the case.
Wow, and this author, Michael Bouchard, he came away feeling the same way as you?
Yes, to a larger degree, he exonerates Kelvin Bowman, but I always have, you get involved in this and you always have a cynical nature with people, but I don't think that Kelvin planned any retribution towards Trenny or wanted to hurt her. He was pretty pissed at her parents, and I mean, I don't blame the guy. I think if he wanted to do anything to anybody, it would have been directed at the family, the mom and dad, not necessarily Trenny. And also, I think if he wanted to get revenge or anything like that, he just would have done it in Knoxville. He didn't have a vehicle. He didn't have any way to get to the park. He was a bit of a badass at school. He spent a fair bit of time in the principal's inner office. And the principal swears that Kelvin was in school that day. So based on that, I don't think he traveled to the park to do anything to Trenny. Like I said, I think if he wanted to, he just would have done something to her in Knoxville or just targeted the parents, because that seemed to be where most of it was directed. Like her parents, they were racist. I mean, there's no nice way to say it. That's just the way it was. I think that he lamented that he wished that Trenny would have stuck up for him, like vouched for him a little bit more, like said, Mom, we're seeing each other, that kind of thing. Not that it would have necessarily done any good, but he kind of wished that she would have done that. But he didn't seem to bear any anger over it either.
All right, we're going to take a quick break for commercial. And just a reminder, folks, that we will return at the end of this conversation with some final thoughts.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. Did Trenny discuss, or was it a known fact about her boyfriend after that? I forget his name, but you mentioned he played basketball.
It is a fairly known fact. There also was a pretty strong rumor. Michael and I are trying to find Derek Scott. Actually, I've been trying to find him for several years. And we keep hitting a brick wall because there was a pretty strong story going around that Trenny was caught shortly before her disappearance in a car with a black boy, like a black man. We potentially want to look into Derek Scott because it's a possibility it may have been him. We know it's not Kelvin Bowman, or we have a pretty good reason to believe it wasn't him. So we're looking at Derek Scott, and we haven't been able to locate him.
How do you start that investigation into somebody from so long ago?
It's difficult. Basically, I start going through and just running names. I have all the Bearden yearbooks, so if the person graduated from Bearden, usually on the page in the back, the seniors directory, where it names all the graduates, it gives their middle name. So that's a good starting point for me. If I have their middle name or initial, that helps me narrow things down. Plus, I know roughly how old they are, what their age is, and then I go from there. It helps, of course, if they haven't left the state of Tennessee. If they've left the state of Tennessee, of course, it becomes a little bit more difficult. It also depends on how common their name is. I mean, Smith, Brown, even Gibson is difficult.
Right, yeah, and Derek Scott, definitely a name that others share, I'm sure.
Yes, for sure.
Was this Derek Scott on the field trip with Trenny that day?
I haven't been able to narrow that down either. Out of the field trip attendees of about 40 students, I have about 2/3 of the names, but Derek Scott is not on the list. So if he was on the field trip, he's part of that missing third.
Interesting. Was he in the same grade as Trenny?
Yes, he was.
Okay, and how does Bob Simpson fit into this?
Bob Simpson or Bob Gibson?
Well, I think I meant Simpson, but feel free to
Okay.
to let us know on either. Yeah.
I know one thing about this story is there's a heck of a lot of Roberts, but
That's coming back.
Robert Simpson, he passed away in 2022, so he's no longer with us. Mr. Wayne Dunlap passed away in 2022 as well. And Kelvin Bowman, interestingly enough, about a week after I spoke to him last August, he passed away. So a lot of our major characters are no longer with us. But Robert Simpson Jr., I believe that he knew a lot more about what happened to Treny that he let on. He was protected by his father, so really he didn't have to give up anything to anybody if he didn't want to. His father, Robert Simpson Sr., was DA in Knoxville for a time. So he was somebody that you didn't cross, you didn't mess with. Interestingly enough, I was contacted in the spring of 2023 by a gentleman that is a nephew to Robert Simpson Jr. So Robert Simpson Sr., the DA, was his grandfather. And this young man received a book in the mail that belonged to his grandfather. I will also say that Robert Simpson Sr., the DA, he's deceased now as well. But anyway, this grandson received this book in the mail, and it was a book that his grandfather owned. So his grandfather had written his name inside the cover, and oddly enough, the book was Unsolved Mysteries in the Great Smoky Mountains. And Treny's case was bookmarked in the book. So this man read this story about Trenny, and he was shocked. He'd never heard of this before. He went online, did some research, and he found my Trenny site, found me, and he messaged me with a bombshell. He thinks that the timing of this may be because Robert Simpson Sr. is gone, Robert Simpson Jr. has passed away, and he thinks that potentially they were involved in Treny's disappearance. His mother was a sister to Robert Simpson Jr. He tried to talk to his mother about it. She was very guarded. He said that his mother does have some mental health issues. She didn't really want to tell him anything. He tried to get information from his father, other sources, and it led to him kind of being alienated by the family. And I told him, I said, what would have been the motive? Like, you have to find some sort of reason that Robert Simpson would have potentially harmed Trenny. Like, what would have been the motive? Would it have been a sexual motive? Or was it to shut her up? Or, get her to be silent? What was the motive? So we're kind of back and forth on this, but he thinks that because he got the book, the timing of it's odd, and he thinks that his grandfather and his uncle may have been involved somehow. He's just trying to figure out how. He's also been in touch with Michael Bouchard as well.
Maybe I missed it. How did the book come to him again?
His grandmother mailed it to him.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So basically his grandfather and his uncle, they passed away fairly close together, about a year and a half, 2 years apart. And he got this book in the mail one day. His grandmother had mailed it to him, and it had his grandfather's signature in the cover of the book. And the part about Treny's story was bookmarked in that book. That's one of the few books that actually has, the story about Treny's case, and that was the first one that came out with information about her case.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, but was this topic something that his grandmother was interested in just in general? And had she had conversations with him about this?
No, it had never come up before he got this book. He didn't even know who Trenny was.
Yeah.
It was when he read this. Well, he was, touched that he got something from his grandfather, and his grandfather had this book. He read it. He read the part about Trenny, really got intrigued because he lives in Knoxville and had never heard of it. He's about, I think, about 2 or 3 years younger than me. So anyway, he started doing some research and, kind of fell down the rabbit hole and thought, whoa, He read about Robert Simpson and everything and how he had hiked with Trenny and this and that. And now he's got his uncle and his grandfather immersed in the story. He just doesn't know exactly what the motive would have been if his uncle harmed Trenny. Because I told him it's got to start somewhere. There's got to be some sort of motive, for Robert Simpson to do this. You have to, tell me why you think that he would be capable and why he'd want to do something like this. It has to go further than you just got a book in the mail that belonged to your grandfather.
Yeah, such an interesting part of this story. Now, what about the idea that Trenny may have been pregnant? Do you believe that's still a good possibility?
I wouldn't necessarily say it was a good possibility. It just ranks among the list of what could have happened to her. I've kind of thought about it and brushed it off over the years. It was when I spoke to Trenny's extended family. Now, she had 2 uncles and a cousin that came to search for her in the park when she went missing. They arrived the day after, so they would have been there on the Saturday, and then Trenny, of course, disappeared on the Friday. And like I said on YouTube, when I've answered the comments, these folks have been missing Trenny for nearly half a century. So every possible scenario has run through their mind, most of them bad. I mean, this isn't the land of sunshine and buttercups. They've come up with some pretty twisted things that we wouldn't probably run across in day-to-day living, but they've racked their brains trying to figure out what on earth could have happened to her. And they were of the mind that Bob Gibson was somehow tied to this. And they thought that it was possible that he went to the park that the day that Trenny went missing. Apparently, those cigarette butts that were found and the half can of beer were cigarettes that Bob typically smoked and beer that Bob typically drank. There were tracks on the ground that looked like a person heavier than Trenny was kind of hunkered down smoking, and that somebody that was lighter sort of hunkered down beside him. They put those things together and decided that it had to have been Bob, that Bob probably came to the park and then for some reason, we don't know why, got Trenny to go away with him. But like I've said before, these folks, they knew Bob. He was part of their family. I didn't even get to meet the guy because he passed away in 2000, and that was a few years before I started researching this case. So potentially they have some reason why they would think this. But it caused quite a rift in the family, Trenny's disappearance did, because these uncles and cousin believed that Trenny's mother and father, Robert and Hope, knew a lot more than they were letting on. And if they just would have been straight and told the entire truth instead of part of it, they believed that potentially that would have led to solving this case, potentially Trenny coming home if she was alive, that sort of thing. So it caused quite a rift in the family. But they were the ones that came up with this, perhaps that Bob went to the park that day that Trenny disappeared, got Trenny to go away with him. One of the possible scenarios was maybe Bob was taking Trenny away before her father came home from business that night to either A, obtain an abortion, or B, take her to an unwed mother's home, or maybe they were just going to go hang out somewhere and he got Trenny to leave and jump in the car with him and take off. But the pregnancy thing has never been substantiated. I have no idea if she was or she wasn't. But I've come under fire because people think that I'm trying to tarnish her memory, that sort of thing, and paint a picture that she was a bad girl. And that's not what I'm trying to do at all. Trenny was human just like the rest of us. None of us are saints. We make mistakes, but we shouldn't have to pay for them for the rest of our lives, unless we've harmed somebody else.
Yeah, and I feel like you'd be doing a disservice to the work that you and other independent, you're not a licensed private investigator, but
No,
you're
not at
independently
all.
looking at it. But there are a lot of people who independently look at these cases, these stories, and I feel like you'd be doing a disservice to them and a disservice to the individual missing if you didn't come to grips with the fact that somebody might not have been an angelic figure and you have to make the difficult decision to say something that's not positive about them if it helps solve something.
Trenny was a 16-year-old kid. Maybe she made a mistake and got pregnant. Hey, it happens. It was dealt with a lot differently in those days than it is now. But basically, she made a mistake, whatever, let's see what we can do about it kind of thing. But I have no evidence that she was nothing. It was just that, hey, she's female, she's 16. Yes, she was interested in boys, even though her family really tried to downplay that Trenny wasn't interested in boys. She wasn't interested in dating. She didn't go anywhere, didn't do anything, whatever. They downplayed that a lot. Trenny was human just like the rest of us. And the thing is, when you grow up in an environment where you're very restricted, you tend to rebel. And, you have to do things if you want to try them. You have to do things on the sly, in secret, that sort of thing. They were strict Southern Baptist, the kind of thing where you went to church, the ladies wore a skirt or a dress, whatever. They went to church twice on Sunday, again on Wednesday evening. The children had Bible study every morning. Some people do well under that environment and some people tend to rebel. And teenagers, they want to try things. They want to experiment, right? And if they're in that kind of environment where their wings are clipped and they're not allowed, then they're going to try and go ahead and do it. Just they're going to have to do it on the sly.
Wow, really interesting stuff. And I know you wanted to mention some of the comments on YouTube on the your last appearance, episode 374. Is there anything you'd like to say to any of those commenters, or just to follow up on your last appearance here?
Well, I also came under fire because some of the some of the posters said things like, "Well, I'm not surprised Hope doesn't want to talk to that woman and all this." Hey, Hope is in her middle 80s. I'm not going to sit down and interrogate the woman. It is what it is what it is. I believe that she should have been more open with some of the facts surrounding Trenny's case, but there were things that she didn't want me to find out, and there were things that she didn't want me to find out slash talk about. And to a point, I understand that, but I also have to say that, like Lance said earlier, I would be doing Trenny a disservice if I didn't poke and probe every angle of this case. And that's what I'm trying to do, not discredit, bring Trenny's memory, like try to tarnish it or anything like that. I'm just trying to look at things at all angles. And her family, the extended family, like I said, every possible scenario has run through their minds. I mean, we got to have a little bit of grace for that. They've been missing her for 50 years. They've thought of everything, and then some. Sadly, Hope, I also spoke to her a few years back, and I mentioned to her that if she were to have Trenny legally declared dead, that we would get access to all the information regarding her case. And she took offense to that. She didn't want Trenny declared dead. She didn't want to go that route, and I respect that. I don't 100% understand it, but I do respect that she would want that. Even though that I believe that she knows that Trenny is deceased anyway, she wants the case left open. She doesn't want her declared legally dead.
So how does that work? So I know you said that she was offended by that and she doesn't want it happening, but how does that work when you declare somebody legally dead?
Well, if she were to have Trenny declared dead, basically we'd get all the information that was available on the case. We wouldn't be stuck, trying to subpoena things or whatever. It's just like, case closed. The family has declared this person deceased. So here's the information regarding it. And something similar happened with the Barbara Cotton case out of the Dakotas. Her mother had Barb legally declared dead, so they were able to get the files and everything on the case. So you can check that case out if you want. It's a pretty interesting rabbit hole too. It's Barbara Cotton. But I mean, Trenny was Hope's daughter. She wasn't mine. So why Hope feels that way, we have to be sensitive to that fact. And then Hope also told me that she couldn't tell me more because she was planning on writing a book about Trenny's case and the effect on the family and whatever. And that happened 7, 8 years ago. There's never been a book. Her family scoffed at that and said that she basically told me that just to get me to stop bothering her, kind of thing, and asking her for information. So.
Yeah, this case is it's almost 49 years old now.
Yes.
I do understand the emotional difficulty considering Trenny might be dead would have on the family, but this might be the only chance to get those files.
Well, Trenny's uncle, one of them passed away here several years back, but Trenny's uncle and her cousins, they don't care. If Trenny had, made a mistake or done something, whatever, they don't care. They just want to know what happened to her. This has gone on for half a century. They don't care, who said what or who did this to whoever, whatever. They don't care. They just want to know what happened to her while they're still on this earth.
Yeah. So, man, what's next for you in all this?
Well, Michael is still working on trying to obtain the FBI files through the exclusionary rule, which worked with the Dennis Martin case. So we're on our 8th or 9th attempt now. I kind of lose track, trying to get the files on Treny. When he did this with the Dennis Martin case, I think it took between 20 and 30 attempts. So we're not quite halfway there yet. So we're working on that. I keep in touch with Trenny's extended family, her uncle and cousins, and speak to them. I'm still looking for more classmates, folks that went on the field trip, the day that Trenny disappeared. I'm still open to talking to them. I'm maintaining my Searching for Trenny Facebook page, adding to that as well. We have the CanadianGirl77.com page about Trenny. I'm looking at winding that up because the server that I have the page through, it's not a very good service. Basically, the site as it stands now is going to stay that way. I can't add to it. And I'm not happy with that, so I'm just transferring everything over to the Searching for Trenny Facebook page. Eventually, I will get another page up with another server for Trenny and add to that as well. I'm continuing to do podcasts, trying to raise awareness about Trenny's case. I've just done a 2-part series with Magical Journey about Trenny Gibson. I'm still researching every day. I'm still talking to people.
Well, fantastic. Yeah, keep up the good work, and you're welcome back here anytime. And I know that there are some other cases that you mentioned and that you've been looking into. We'd love to have you back on to speak about those as well.
Awesome. Yes, another case that I've been following it's called The Missing Boys of Caledon, Ontario. I believe I sent you the link. It's two young men that went missing in the summer of 1981. They went missing at the same time, and they've never ever been found. There's also the case of Jeffrey Dupree. Jeffrey and I share a birth year. We were the same age, and he went missing from Slave Lake, Alberta in 1980. And we believe that one was a stranger abduction. And his mother has done some podcast episodes, and she has a Facebook page about her son as well. Another one is a young lady named Carolyn Prizer, and she went missing from the Peace River area in 1984. She was a college student who was attending the University of Alberta in Edmonton, and she was home for the summer and went out, watched a hockey game with a friend, stopped at a store, convenience store, and then was headed home. Her family lived on a farm a few miles out of town and was abducted from her car. Her car was found on the back road leading to the property, door open, purse, keys in the car, and Carolyn disappeared. That case is kind of special to me because my husband is originally from that area, Peace River, Alberta. So, yes. So I've been looking into those, trying to find out, what I can. But Trenny is still my main focus. I would love to find out what happened to her, and I don't think I could actually bring her home whole, but I would like very much to find out what happened to her and bring a resolution to all this.
And we're back here for final thoughts. Wow, really interesting conversation with Laura. She always brings the information, but she always brings us something new every time. And this conversation was no different.
Yeah, and again, I said it in the intro, but I always walk away with this feeling like we learned something. Every time we speak to her, she just becomes a little bit more candid with her feelings and a little bit less guarded just in her investigation. She is really adamant and dogged in her pursuit of this, and it just comes through every single time we talk to her. What was some of the new stuff that you took away?
Well, the Kelvin Bowman section, I think, was probably the most interesting to me. We had spoken about Kelvin Bowman previously with Laura, and he was always kind of painted as a possible suspect. As the story went previously, he tried to break into the Gibson house and, I guess, sexually assault Treny, or potentially worse. And that Hope Gibson shot him in the foot and he ran off. Or actually, I should say he tried to break in further, and then I believe the police were called. But so Laura, in the past couple of years, spoke with Kelvin Bowman, and she's now working with an author named Michael Bouchard, who the both of them spoke with Kelvin Bowman, and in Laura's words, she said Michael exonerates him to a larger degree than she did. But it doesn't sound like Laura thought that Kelvin Bowman was a suspect anymore at all. In fact, the story that Kelvin shared about that night that Treny's mom shot him in the foot was a pretty different story. He had said that him and Treny were an item. They were dating, and that she had frequently left the window open for him to come over and, I guess, sneak in the window. That's a little bit of a he said, she said now, being almost 50 years in the past. Like, I don't know exactly which is true. Maybe there's a little bit of both that's true, but I don't know. That was probably the most interesting part. The most new kind of eye-opening stuff was that it seems like Laura really doesn't consider Kelvin Bowman to be suspicious anymore.
Nor does she consider Treny's family to be very tolerant of one of the few black young men in town. She said it a couple of times that, hey, they were racist, and not a easy thing to say about the family of somebody who disappeared so young. But yeah, I mean, if they're a racist family, even if they're not like overtly racist, and they find out that a young black man has been let into their daughter's bedroom willingly, by her, that's going to cause some problems. And Laura does that thing that we mentioned earlier, where she knows that, hey, things aren't all like warm and fuzzy, and things don't get tied up in a nice, neat bow. She did say that Kelvin has done a ton of bad things in his life. He's acknowledged them, and he was never like an angel. He was never a saint, and he doesn't ever claim to be a saint. And I feel like that kind of speaks towards his case. Michael and Laura spoke to him, and shortly thereafter, he passed away. So he's getting towards the end of his life. He's getting older, probably acknowledging some of the mistakes that he's made, some of the bad things he's done. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm just saying he really at this point doesn't have much reason to lie. And the difference in the story was so mundane. The family said he did this thing and it escalated and they had to call the police, and his version was so mundane. Yes, I was entering in and her mom shot me in the foot and I hobbled away and ended up, catching up to the person who gave him a ride, who consistently was giving him rides. So you know what I'm saying? Like if he were to lie in that situation, he would probably like maybe make it a little bit of a more grand lie, I guess. But also, if he did something to Treny, Laura has a great point. He would have done it in town. He would have done it somewhere else. He wasn't going to go out of his way to hijack her during the field trip where there's a bunch of students and teachers.
Yeah, she also said that he probably would have done something to the Gibsons and not to Treny. He didn't have any animosity towards Treny.
Right.
In fact, he said that he still had feelings for Treny. And also the principal swears that Kelvin was in school that day.
Right.
He didn't have a car, so Laura said that, he really had no way to get to the park. Had he borrowed a car, obviously you're bringing someone else in. So yeah, I think case closed on Kelvin Bowman.
I'm with you, but there are many Roberts that, case closed not on in this story.
I agree, and it doesn't seem like the case is closed on either Bob Simpson or Bob Gibson, Treny's brother. I think we're kind of whittling our way down a little bit, and some of Simpson's family contacted Laura, which I thought was very interesting to hear that they are considering their family member to have been a part of a disappearance case, and what implications, does that leave with the family?
The one item in all of this that no matter how many times we talk to Laura, no matter how many directions she goes in her investigation, the one or two items that never really seem to have a good enough answer, the ring and the comb. There's never like a good enough answer here.
I know. And we did get into it a bit in this conversation again, and she did say, Laura did say that the ring part was hearsay, so it's not 100% confirmed, but she did say that the Gibsons believed it was Treny's and tried to get the police to pursue getting the ring back from the classmate. But they weren't, I guess, interested enough in the lead. But it also definitely sounds like Treny's comb was in Simpson's car. So yeah, this part is very strange to me as well. I don't think Treny's given that stuff away for any reason, like if she's running away on her own or, going to get some secretive, medical procedure, which, not completely off the table, but wouldn't have been Kelvin's kid. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where that leaves us with that stuff. Seems sort of suspicious still of Simpson, I would have to say.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Again, no real answer on the comb. No real clear idea why he had the comb on his person after her disappearance. And I feel like sometimes these stories tend to lean a little too heavily on young woman gets pregnant and travels to get an abortion, and that abortion goes wrong or something like that. Something goes wrong along the ways. Because we do talk to a lot of people and a lot of women who have had children very young and nothing's gone wrong. They'll tell us like, obviously it wasn't a easy thing to do, but the first option typically is not to like run away to get the abortion from some shady practitioner who's not licensed or something. And then it's completely covered up without a trace.
Right. Yeah, that seems a bit unlikely to me as well.
And even if she was pregnant and one of the people that we talk about, one of the males that we talk about, finds her during the class trip off the trail and she ducks into the trail, what is this like adolescent doing that's so skillful at killing and permanently hiding a body? How are they that skilled at this?
Yeah, very strange.
Yeah.
I mean, in looking at the pictures from Laura's Facebook page, she does keep up with photos of the trails and things like that. And it's really interesting to look at that stuff because it really looks like it's kind of thick growth all around the trails. So I'm almost not surprised that someone, and people, we've spoken about multiple people who have gotten lost in the park at this point. I'm not surprised that people get lost in the park. But yeah, I just don't know what happened to Treny, if someone took her away, or it almost seems like at this point, because of the search efforts, that she wouldn't have just been able to get lost, like accidentally. But I don't know. You look at those pictures and they are kind of frightening, like to see how the vegetation is pretty grown,
Of course. I mean, yeah, I could see someone getting in there and like easily panicking and having no orientation to their direction pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You did make a comment before we started recording about the age progression that they've done on Treny. What's your feelings on that? Because I'm looking at it now and I never can tell with these age progression things.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. It actually looks pretty decent to me, but it's really kind of hard to tell because most of the photos we have of Treny are in black and white. So you can't even really get a great idea of her eye color, but it looks brown in the age progression, even though it says green in other sources. So, yeah, not quite sure.
Yeah.
Oh, and there was someone new that was mentioned, a new character, Derek Scott.
Yeah. Being
a basketball playing classmate of Treny's that she was interested in and perhaps dating around the time she went missing. Laura was trying to track him down and trying to find out if he was on the field trip that day. She did say he was in the same grade as her, but could not find out if he was on the field trip that day. But I will also say, like, I don't know how he would have done something, even if they were like an item and he was on the field trip. Like, I don't know. The whole case is so weird when you just look at that moment. I just don't know how she got out of that park, willingly or unwillingly.
Yep. And unless I'm mistaken, and I have to think back to the earlier episodes, none of the kids knew that they were going on this trip, right? That's still the case.
They knew they were going on a field trip, but they didn't know where.
Yeah, the destination.
Yeah, until Dunlap told them that morning. Yeah.
Right. And that was the big point of contention because they were like, well, the weather's crappy. Like, the kids should have known how to prepare for this.
Yeah. I think Laura also mentioned that some kids like suspected as much. Like most of them kind of suspected, but it wasn't confirmed until that morning. But yeah, so I think that's why Trenny had a jacket. I believe it was her mom's jacket, I want to say, that she borrowed before she left.
Yeah, it was a lighter jacket. So that questions, my, like, any level of theory I have about if she ran away. She knows she's going on a field trip. She knows that the weather's bad. She might have an indication that it's at the, in the Smoky Mountains, but she doesn't know for sure. So why is she like barely packing any clothing that would keep her warm just in case, that's the destination that she's going to run away at or from?
Yeah.
Very strange.
Yeah, certainly not prepared to run away, in any way, shape, or form. So that doesn't seem like Trenny consciously, intentionally ran away. But, this is quite an enduring mystery because, I don't know how she got out of that park, willingly or not. So, it's a tragic case.
It really is. Really is. But silver lining for the whole thing is that Laura Riste is on the case. She won't stop until she has some sort of answer I'm confident of. So I feel very fortunate that we are amongst the members of the media, the podcasting media that she, at least on the surface, enjoys speaking with about Trenny. So I feel good about that.
Yeah, me too. All right, everyone. Well, thanks a lot for listening here today. I hope you learned something about Trenny Gibson's disappearance. This was quite a journey of an episode, I feel like. But thanks for hanging out with us and listening. Please follow us on social media at MissingCSM, and we will be back Monday with a brand new episode.